My name is Monica O'Brien, and in this short video, this short talk, I'm going to be discussing how religion influenced some of the measures taken by the city of Nuremberg to deal with the Great Pox or syphilis between about 1495 and 1520. So Nuremberg was a free imperial city. It was autonomous. It was ruled by a city council. There was no duke, no bishop. The Holy Roman Emperor was, of course, ultimately in charge, but he didn't intervene in the day-to-day running of the city really very much at all. So it was down to this council to run the city. And looking at their records, what I've seen is religion was a crucial motivator for the kinds of charity and care both before and after Nuremberg's reformation to Lutheranism. Religion motivated the charity and the care that the council was providing to those who became sick with the disease, especially the poor who couldn't afford their own medical care. And it also provided a very important justification at times for the council too. The council had quite strictly worded legislation about who could access healthcare in the city, especially kind of from in the early 16th century. This began to be developed quite carefully. So it excluded usually people who didn't have any kind of citizenship rights in the city, usually meaning they weren't born there. It could exclude people later on, especially as we move kind of more into the 17th century. It could start to exclude people on moral judgments as well. But occasionally, or even indeed quite frequently on the scale of things, we see victims of the Great Pox turning up in the city, maybe say not native to the city, without citizenship rights, but the council decides to give them charity anyway. And that may have been completely founded on religious belief that it was better to be compassionate, or it may have been founded as well on practical reasons. If you have these very sick individuals in your city who are basically unable to walk perhaps with the disease, it poses an infection risk to your healthy population. It's much better to look after them, but you have the problem of you, if the council have already legislated against looking after these people, but invoking religious ideas of being compassionate allowed them to work around these kind of parameters that they had set as well. So it was an important justification, but also we shouldn't kind of reduce it to just that. I think at the core as well, there was religious belief and an attempt to live under Catholic and later Lutheran or Protestant ideas really influenced members of the council in terms of the provision that they provided as well. On the flip side of this as well, what we also see are petitions from poor individuals in the city who couldn't afford medical care, who needed help from the council to get treatment for the Great Pox. And they also invoke religious ideas, and they say, please be compassionate, think of God's compassion, please grant us some help so we can return to health and continue to be moral and upstanding Christians, and also good members of your city as well. So about 3 years ago, as by way of wrapping up, about 3 years ago, I was walking through an exhibition called Luther, Columbus and the Consequences in the Germanisches Nationalmuseum, which is in Nuremberg. And I turned a corner, and on one of the exhibition walls was a quote which stated that the Great Pox is, quote, one of the greatest signs of the final days, end quote. This quote was first published around 1543, and it comes from none other than the great reformer Martin Luther. And I think Martin Luther's statement here captures one of the kind of religious interpretations and emotions that surrounded the Great Pox. That is the anxiety of, is this something that we as humans can overcome? Why is this here? Why perhaps is God angry? Will we be able to appease God? What can we do to appease God? Is that possible? Is that possible at all? But as I've been kind of going through this research, I've found that religious responses to the Great Pox were incredibly diverse, and incredibly complex as well. Not only do we see anxiety, kind of this fear of God that we kind of get a sense of from Martin Luther, we also see in some instances how religion did contribute to stigmatization of some victims of the disease. In a few German medical texts from the early 16th century, I found authors who write that there are victims of this disease who have behaved in a way that is considered sinful in Catholic or later Lutheran traditions or other Protestant traditions. They have behaved sinfully and they deserve their infection and the suffering that it brings. But they're also very emphatic that there are a lot of innocent victims of this disease. While the Great Pox might be a punishment in general on society, not everyone who gets the disease is necessarily a sinner. Some of them also pick it up, like I was saying, it was thought to perhaps spread through non-sexual forms of contact, through shared drinking vessels, through exchanging money, through food even. So some of these victims are very innocent as well, and they're emphatic that there needs to be very careful consideration of everyone who comes forward with this disease, and that particularly those who are innocent, should be within their definition, should be treated with great compassion and care. And religion was a huge motivator for the compassion and care that individuals showed on just an interpersonal level, but also in terms of the kinds of charitable provisions, the hospitals, the funding, the kind of the support for those networks that municipal authorities like Nuremberg provided. What they provided as well, it was really it was core to those things coming into existence. So religion, it had a multifaceted kind of impact on medicine, on society, on individual thinking, and this is something that I hope I've given you at least a small insight into in this talk. It's something I'm really looking forward to continuing my research into over the next year or so.